Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Gathering Place, brought to you by the Gullah Chamber of Commerce. Y'all, I'm tripping over my own words, but that's not unusual. We're happy to have you here with us today, and we're also happy to have our special co-host, Deontay Winchester, joining us today. Hello, Deontay.
Hello, Miss Hemingway. How are you?
Great, thank you. I just want our viewing audience to know that I might have to step away in a few minutes, and Deontay has graciously decided to step up and co-host with me today, and that's a wonderful day. That's a wonderful thing because Deontay's a pretty good questioner, and he's just as nosy as I am about different topics.
I'm not quite as pretty as she is, but y'all got to deal with me today.
But I never wear the cool hats either. All right, Deontay. So today's topic is the Sierra Club, and we're going to be talking to them about their Beyond Coal campaign, their lawsuit against DHEC, and how it has impacted the Gullah communities, because it's right here in Georgetown that two of the facilities, I believe, are impacting our community, or definitely one, the Wynyard Generating Station. So we want to know more about what's going on with the Beyond Coal campaign, what's going on with the DHEC lawsuit, and its impact on the community. So I'm going to bring in our special guests one at a time, and we'll say hello to Dori. Hi, Dori. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
Great, thank you. Dori is a senior attorney with a focus on decarbonizing the electrical grid for the Beyond Coal campaign in the Southeast, primarily Virginia, West Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia. And prior to working with the Sierra Club, she spent 12 years as an assistant attorney general in Washington State, handling all sorts of environmental matters. And I'm sure we'll learn more about her as we go through this interview, and I'm looking forward to that. But one thing I want to know, Dori, do you know his name I totally blanked on right now, the governor of the state of Washington?
I don't know him personally. I worked a lot more closely with the attorney general, but not necessarily with the governor.
Jay Inslee.
Yes.
Yes. Woo. I met him. I love him. He's a great environmentalist, and he ran for president briefly, but climate change was his hallmark policy. So kudos to him. Good to have you, Dori.
Great. Thank
today.
you.
All right. We're also joined by Will Harlan. Hi, Will. How are you today? Oh, unmute, Will.
Sorry. Thanks so much for including me, Marilyn. It's great to be here.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for joining us. Will is senior campaign representative for the Beyond Coal campaign in the Carolinas, and he's going to give us some more information about him throughout the campaign also. And he is also he served as editor-in-chief of Blue Ridge Outdoors magazine, and I love the Blue Ridge area, so looking forward to hearing maybe a little bit more about that if we have some time. We are also joined by our homegirl, LaToya Anderson. Hi, LaToya.
Hello, Marion and Deontay.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. LaToya is a local community activist with the Sierra Club. And she's right here in our local Sandpit community, which that's where the Wynyard Generating Station is located. So we'll hear more about that and her part of bringing that to the community and educating the community. And last but not least, we have Xavier Boatwright. We got a big crowd today. Hi, Xavier. How are you?
Hello, Marilyn. Thanks for having us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for coming on. I'm looking forward to this. Xavier is a native of Manning, South Carolina, and he holds an undergraduate degree in biology and a minor in sociology from Presbyterian College. So he is really smart. And, and he is an organizing representative with the Beyond the Coal campaign with the Sierra Club. And we're looking forward to getting to know everyone much better and in deeper circumstances. But right now we want to talk about what is the Sierra Club, what's your mission, and then we'll roll into the Beyond Coal campaign. So Will, can you start and just let folks who don't know, we may have heard about the Sierra Club, but what is the Sierra Club really about and what's its mission?
Well, Sierra Club traditionally has been about enjoying, exploring, and protecting the planet. I think traditionally it has a reputation of hiking and conservation issues, and those are still core issues. But increasingly, in the past decade, we've focused a lot more on equity and environmental justice issues, and not just protecting wild landscapes and beautiful places, but actually protecting communities and ensuring that community voices are heard. And so that's really where the Beyond Coal campaign has gathered its momentum. For the past decade, we've been really focused on ensuring that the country commits to a 100% renewable energy future, but that the communities that are most affected by dirty coal plants and fossil fuel plants are part of the conversation and are leading the transition away from dirty, expensive fossil fuels towards a healthier, cleaner, renewable future. So that's really what we're focused on. And South Carolina is a relatively new campaign for us, but Xavier and LaToya have led the charge. In just our first few months, they have done an incredible job of bringing the communities together and talking about clean energy issues. And now Dori and our team have launched this litigation to protect the water in South Carolina. So it's been a really exciting time, especially in South Carolina, for Sierra Club and the Beyond Coal campaign.
Very good. So who wants to jump in and tell Deontay and I more about the Beyond Coal campaign? And where are you right now with the Beyond Coal campaign in South Carolina? Xavier?
Yes, yes. So the Beyond Coal campaign, we have been focusing a lot of our on the ground efforts actually in Georgetown County around the Wynyard generating station. And right around March, it was March 5th when we had our first community meeting there. And I know LaToya and several other folks were present at that meeting. It was actually the day of our first cases of COVID. So after that, we have had to kind of retool the way that we've been organizing, as everyone has, and what we're doing right now in this virtual forum. And we have continued to provide educational awareness, as well as in this educational awareness, looking at intersections between coal plants, like long-term air pollution, and studies that show that could lead to increased risk from COVID-19 and our current reality there. And then also looking at intersections of the placement of these plants in African American and Black communities, indigenous people of color communities, and looking at those intersections with Black Lives Matters and some of those realities in our current times. And through that intersectional movement, we've been really able to continue to do virtual organizing and keep an open ear to major cultural and political events that are impacting those frontline communities, but still continue to also educate those folks on these coal plants as they intersect with those issues.
Okay, so you told us a little bit about what you guys do, and that's very important work, and we appreciate you all for that. Can you tell us a little bit about why you felt it was important right now to pick up this work?
Because I think it's really important that we make the transition from coal to clean energy. Coal is not only one of the most expensive ways to generate energy, it's also one of the most toxic. There's contamination that we'll talk about later on when Dori and LaToya and we talk more about the lawsuit and some of the implications of that. But also just in general, there's groundwater contamination, long-term air pollution, a carbon tax, and impacts to climate change, and that's very important in the state of South Carolina, given that we are a coastal state and we feel the brunt of hurricanes. That has been increasingly impacting our coastline every year with historic flooding and more.
Okay, we have a question from our viewers. You spoke a little bit about the intersectionality, and what they would like to know is how exactly does the Beyond Coal campaign coincide with that of Black Lives Matter?
Well, I think I stated earlier that these coal plants, when you think about maybe 60, 70 to 80 years ago when coal plants were built, this was also during the Jim Crow era. And a lot of these plants were placed in low income. Not only there are low income whites there, but low income and communities of color. For example, when you look at the Water Recall plant, it's in Lower Richland, which is predominantly African American. The neighbors who live the closest to Dominion's water replant are around 90% African American and people of color. Also, a huge low income population there. And then also, folks in Lower Richland, if you learn more, and it gets kind of outside and where we talk about being intersectional, there are many threats to public health in that area where they placed a lot of these facilities. So looking at that placement, and then also when specifically to Black Lives Matter, we have done things so far as to go and stand in solidarity at marches while remaining safe and keeping social distance, and allowing organizations like the NAACP, the Gullah Chamber of Commerce, and many others, Human Rights Campaign, to name just a few, to lead folks who are already leading on those issues on the ground and leading in those communities, to try to stand in solidarity and encourage our members to stand in solidarity and support those issues.
Okay. Can we talk about a little bit of the health impacts of individuals living near those coal plants? And anybody can answer this.
I'll just start with the air and water pollution, and this might segue into the litigation or some of the other impacts that Xavier has noted. But obviously, asthma rates are significantly higher around coal plants. That's mainly from particulate matter, but also sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide. So there's respiratory and long-term cardiovascular impacts of living near a coal plant. And then as our litigation has pointed out, there's wastewater, there's coal ash, but then there's also bottom ash wastewater that is directly discharged into our beloved waterways, into potential drinking water sources, especially for communities near those coal plants. And those toxic pollutants include mercury, arsenic, selenium, toxic lead. These are being, this is stuff that is entering the drinking water and the air of the people who live near these coal plants. And that's causing serious immediate and long-term health impacts on these communities.
So, Ms. LaToya or Xavier, can you tell us what are some of the ways in which some of these health risks are being communicated to the community?
I can take this one. A lot of folks in these communities have pre-existing conditions, respiratory conditions, and things that are already going on. And those pre-existing conditions, increase risk, especially in our current reality right now. As far as maybe LaToya could probably speak more on the direct impacts to the community of the folks maybe around Winya.
Thank you, Xavier. So the wastewater discharges need more frequent monitoring and enforceable limits for all toxic metals from the coal plant to meet safe water quality standards from the Sanpit and Santee rivers, which is needed to start immediately. So basically, toxic contamination discharged from the Winya station should be monitored continuously, as many of these toxic metals can bioaccumulate in fish and animals, including humans. These metals can have impacts for generations and impact the growth and development of children.
And I just wanted to add also that DHEC, they give us a fish consumption advisory, and they put these signs up telling us like how many fish to consume. And I'll share those links with folks, or you could just do a Google search to put DHEC fish consumption advisory. And they even have on that list for certain rivers, there are fish that they have do not eat orders for. And most of the fish you see on there, you see like one meal a week or even one a day. And we all know, we've talked about like the time-honored tradition of a Southern fish fry, and we go out and we fish. I'm here in Manning, home of the Striped Bass Festival, and we fish heavily on Lake Marion. And we eat more than one fish when we do that, or more, at least more than once a week. So definitely relaying that, I think, as far as DHEC goes, we need them to prevent the contaminants like mercury and arsenic from getting in the water. These contaminants that LaToya just said, they bioaccumulate in animal and fish tissue. We need them to prevent those from getting in the fish in the first place, than more so than telling us how many fish to eat.
Okay. So I think now it's time to get into the meat and potatoes of, I think, why all the viewers are here. Let's talk about this lawsuit. Dori and Will, you guys want to tell a little bit about what the lawsuit entails and why it was needed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lawsuit we filed last week was against DHEC, and it was to basically ask the court to issue an order forcing them to act on the coal plant's expired NPDES permits, which are National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permits. And those permits essentially tell in this case, a coal plant, how much pollutants they can discharge into a river or into a lake or a stream or wherever their discharge point is. And in this particular case, for Watery Cross and Winya, their permits expired between 8 and 10 years ago. And these permits are only good for 5 years. So basically, DHEC has been sitting on these expired permits for 8 to 10 years. Now, these coal plants, they did file their renewal applications on time. Which is why the lawsuit is against DHEC and not the utilities themselves, because they did actually do what they were supposed to do. It's DHEC that is essentially just not acting in this case. And so we felt after 8 to 10 years of doing nothing, that the lawsuit was necessary in order to basically compel them to take some sort of action. Now, that action could be denying the permit renewal application for various reasons, or it could be issuing a draft permit. That draft permit would then become subject to public notice and comment periods, some public hearings, definitely an opportunity for the community to comment on these draft permits. And that's basically what we're trying to get out of DHEC at this stage in the game, because in the interim, since these permits have expired, new regulations have gone into effect from the EPA. And those regulations are called the Effluent Limitation Guidelines. And they set pretty strict standards for coal plants as far as what's coming out of their boilers when it comes to cleaning out the boilers and the ash that is produced from the coal making process. And without updated permits, there's no requirements included in those permits. There's no timelines, there's no limits, there's no frequency for how often you have to monitor. So all of that is currently missing from these 3 permits, and that's what we want DHEC to address.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys would like to add about the need for more regulation and why this lawsuit is being filed against DHEC?
I'll just add, we're focused on 3 plants, as Dori mentioned, Watery, Cross, and Winya. And those 3 plants are located along some of the most beloved waterways in the state. They affect Lake Marion and Lake Moultrie, which Xavier mentioned, are prized bass fishing lakes. They affect the Watery and Congaree rivers, which run beside Congaree National Park, which is an iconic national park and one of the newest national parks in the country. The Sandpit River that LaToya was describing is an essential part of her community where folks have fished for generations, and that flows down into the coastal waters. So it affects waterways all across the state. And so it's both these local communities that are affected, but really all South Carolinians should be concerned about the wastewater that is being discharged from these facilities.
Okay. And Lori, I know you spoke just a little about this during your spiel, but can you elaborate just a little bit more about why DHEC is being sued as opposed to the utilities themselves?
Well, the main reason is because the way this lawsuit is well, the way the lawsuit was filed is it's called a petition for mandamus. So it's basically asking the court to issue an order requiring someone to do something. Well, the person in this case that didn't do something that is required under state and federal law to take action is DHEC. So the utilities are required under their permits to issue renewal applications to DHEC within 6 months of their permits expiring. The ideal situation would be that you then, within that 6-month time period, the agency, in this case DHEC, would then review the application, gather more information if necessary, and then issue a new permit as soon thereafter, after the permit expires, so that they're constantly under a new and valid permit. I mean, these permits, not only incorporate new laws and regulations that have taken effect in the 5 years that they were pending or active, but it's also an opportunity for the agency to review, the standards that are already in there. So maybe there's new technology that's come out that would allow them to further decrease the amount of pollutants that they're putting into the river or to the lake. So in this case, because the utilities did comply with the law and they did submit their applications on time, it's essentially out of their hands at this point. They can't force DHEC to issue that permit any faster than, say, we can through a court action. Now, I guess they could have issued the lawsuit as well, but I'm sure they're perfectly happy to use their current permits that don't require them to monitor as frequently for things such as arsenic, mercury, and selenium, which the new regulations do require, because a lot of that is going to require them to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to bring these coal plants into compliance with the new law. In another case that we're working right now with the Public Service Commission, in the Dominion's Dominion's planning case, they've already said it's going to cost approximately $225 million to bring some of these coal plants into compliance with the new regulations. So my guess is they're not under any hurry in order to spend that money to come into compliance.
Okay. I think now we'll go into a couple of the questions from our viewers in the community here. Ms. Elaine Cooper would like to know, why are there no warning signs about the unsafe fish? And what are we doing to ask or demand the authorities to put up those signs?
That's a great question, and one that we should probably do more along with other partners, because mercury contamination is a very serious issue. As LaToya mentioned, it can bioaccumulate, and there are general warning signs in places where there's known mercury contamination. But honestly, as this permitting process has revealed, we don't really know how much mercury is coming off of these coal plants. They have been allowed to discharge excessive amounts, and we don't precisely know the danger that is being posed to the community. That's one reason we want DHEC to act on these permits, so we know exactly how much mercury and arsenic and lead are being discharged from these facilities. Sadly, the Cross Power Plant has the 4th highest mercury levels from its wastewater in the country, and that's under existing permits. So it's unclear. It's probably much more right now with the permits not even being with the outdated permits. So there are some serious concerns about coal wastewater in our waterways, and we should definitely have more signage and more education around that. And that's one of our priorities. And this litigation will help us more specifically determine how much mercury is in our water and what dangers that poses to the public.
Okay. Another question is, what's the next timeline for DHEC? And when do we foresee that there will be an availability for public comments and involvement from the disenfranchised community surrounding the areas that are affected?
So I can take the timeline question. So unfortunately, we don't have a timeline. So generally what would happen is, and this would be in a non-COVID scenario, is that we filed a lawsuit, and then you would get a scheduling order from the judge and the court laying out maybe it's an opportunity to file briefing and then having an oral argument so that the judge can then issue an order on our lawsuit. So we have kind of a little bit of uncertainty with COVID and the way that, and because the South Carolina courts, as are all courts across the nation, have been shut down for quite a few months, and they've only been, moving forward on cases that they have to, that are under strict deadlines. So unfortunately, we filed the lawsuit, but we're going to be kind of in a holding pattern until such time as the court gets to our lawsuit, and it may or may not rise to the level of importance that we would like it to on the court's calendar. But ideally, we would get an order from the court at hopefully sometime in the near future that would lay out a compliance schedule for DHEC to issue an action on these permits. And then as soon as they do issue that draft permit, that's when the timeline is triggered for public comments. And as soon as we have, an order from the court and we know when DHEC is going to be issuing the draft permit based on that order, then we would be able to finally start mobilizing with a date certain to get the community involved.
Okay. As with everything else, we are being affected by COVID in this situation. We can't get into the courtroom. What are the plans to involve and engage with? Well, we actually just answered that one. Let's move on to the next. This is one for you specifically, Miss Dori. Why is DHEC having such a delay with their action?
Well, the only answer I can give is based on a conversation and a meeting that we did have with DHEC quite a few months ago. And basically, because of the uncertainty surrounding the effluent limitation guideline rules, because of the EPA administration, the current administration has proposed a new rule that would essentially roll back a lot of the stringent requirements of the rule that we're trying to get put into these permits. They basically, my understanding from that conversation was that they wanted to wait and see if that rule was going to become final. And then they wanted to wait and see if there was going to be any litigation surrounding that final rule. So they basically didn't want to take any action until there was some certainty surrounding the rule. Our response to them on that comment was simply that, the rule is in effect, and there are portions of it that you can put in the permit, and we can't just sit around and wait for the current administration to maybe roll back that rule. And then if you're going to sit around and wait for a lawsuit to happen, well, that could be months, years going by, and we've already waited 8 to 10 years. And so is the community, and the community needs these updated permits in order to make sure that they're, the water in the lakes are safe.
Okay.
And I'll just underscore something that Dori said earlier. It's going to cost at least $220 million. Other estimates are as high as $900 million to bring a lot of these coal plants into compliance with new rules. None of these coal companies—
And these are the numbers nationwide?
No, these are just the coal plants in South Carolina.
Wow, okay.
So those are big numbers. Those are numbers that can shut coal plants down. And so most likely these coal plants do not want to make these investments in cleaner technology. They don't want to upgrade their facilities. And so that's probably one reason for this delay, that DHEC is probably complicit in some way. This is pure speculation, but one possible reason for the delay is that they don't want these coal plants to have to spend millions, hundreds of millions in upgrading their power plants. But that would save lives, that would improve health, that would help us transition to a cleaner future. It has immense benefits for the public. But sadly, it seems DHEC has been captured or is motivated by other things other than public health, and is choosing to ignore their duty to protect public health in this case.
Okay. Do you guys know if there is presently any research being conducted on mercury and its effects on the environment?
Yeah. Mercury is known to have harmful effects in the human body and in the environment. I'm actually on DHEC's website right now. Their fish consumption advisory, and their first tab says, like, why should I eat fish? And it says it boosts heart health. Eating fish boosts heart health and can reduce your chances of having a stroke or heart attack. But when you go down to what are some of the health notes for fish, and DHEC says that too much consumption of fish with high levels of mercury may lead to heart disease in adults. And then also, I think it's of major interest and note here that on their fish consumption advisory, it says mercury in the environment uh, the largest sources of pollution stem from decades of burning fossil fuel like coal and waste. And this is on DHEC's site. Their fish consumption advisory. I'm having technical difficulties. It happens to the best of us in this reality. So I'm not able to post that link, but if someone else can, it's just their fish consumption advisory main page. And if you go down to the link that says, what do I need to know about mercury? And on their own site, they say, from decades of burning fossil fuel like coal and waste. So some major implications here. And then they also admit on their site that high consumption of mercury in fish can cause heart disease. So it's really, it's really kind of a no-brainer when they have it on their own website that these permits should be updated.
So we advise all of our viewers to go to the DHEC website and check out that fish consumption advisory and view some of the information and what's being said about mercury and other things that are harmful with too much consumption of our fish. One more question is, do you guys think that coal plants are waiting until after the November election? And how will this lawsuit possibly be affected by what happens thereafter? Of course, we can only speculate, but
absolutely. I mean, I think as far as how the lawsuit can be affected, I don't think it can. I mean, we're trying to enforce the rule as it currently stands now. Even if a new rule was filed by the Trump administration before he hopefully leaves office, the rule is still a valid rule, especially if it ends up being challenged. A lot of times organizations like Sierra Club or others may litigate that new rule, and then the new rule doesn't take effect until such time as the litigation is resolved. So we would still continue to move forward with the litigation to get the rule as it stands now incorporated into the permit. I would like to think that if a new administration were to come on board starting in January, that the proposed rule that the Trump administration put out in November of last year would just get ripped up and thrown away, because it weakens the standards for the toxic metals and allows the coal plants to discharge more pollutants into the river. So we're definitely hoping that that rule doesn't ever see the light of day again. Fingers crossed that is the case.
Okay.
And I wanted to add to that based on conversations with LaToya and other folks around Georgetown and Wynya, folks around Cross, and folks in Eastover around the water replant, many folks feel as though any threat to public health and toxic releases of pollution should be taken seriously and handled right now to give us the best chances to get through a pandemic. And that is something that I think everybody could agree on, regardless of what happens politically. We need the best chance to survive a pandemic, and these not having these permits updated and having these toxic releases, we can't say that that's given us the best chance.
Okay. So what, if any, research is being done on air quality surrounding these coal plants?
Well, I could take that one. Actually, I just received a package today in the mail. We're working on getting air monitors up around coal plants, several air monitors around Cross and Wynya to just get some preliminary data. I will say in those conversations with community members around there, maybe LaToya could speak to this, that folks, we've been talking about this in Georgetown since early March, but folks are very interested in air monitoring around the plants and collecting data at this time. And just going back to COVID-19 and the pandemic, that just increases the urgency for getting these monitors up. LaToya, did you want to add anything?
You pretty much summed it up, but yes, we are in the process of getting that underway.
Okay.
I'll just add that I want to highlight something Xavier mentioned earlier, that air pollution around coal plants is already deadly and dangerous, but during a pandemic, it's even more deadly. And he mentioned the Harvard study, and there have been several other subsequent studies that have shown that death rates are increased in these coal plant communities. That air pollution, especially from particulate matter, causes death rates to increase. Death rates to increase. So not only is it dangerous on its own, but especially in times of a pandemic, it's causing even more deaths. So that dealing with that pollution is especially urgent. And then just to point out that air pollution contains mercury and arsenic and lead and all of those heavy metals often then fall into our rivers and lakes and streams and bioaccumulate. So they both the air pollution and the water pollution contribute to the dangerous bioaccumulation of mercury and other toxic metals in our fish, in our food, and in our water.
Okay. What can members of the community do if there are concerns about air quality?
I think folks, there are groups who specialize in air quality in the state. I know Clean Air Carolina is one. Contacting us, we could help facilitate those dialogues. For other folks who have concerns near coal plants, we're willing to help in any way that we can with that. Also, there's different technologies that like the technology that we're using. There's different technologies that you could look into. And we could help with that too, if you're interested in doing like local air monitoring, community-led air monitoring, because I know that's a hot topic right now.
Okay.
Well, maybe I was just going to add to that really quickly, is that a member of the community could also issue, or submit to DHEC like what's called kind of like a freedom of information request. So if there was certain data or information that you wanted to get from DHEC regarding the air quality in your neighborhood or in your community, if they have monitors in those areas, then because they're a state agency, they're obligated to respond to your request for public information.
If any of I'm sorry, go ahead, Will. Did you have something?
Well, I think just to point out the obvious solution, we don't need these coal plants anymore. And so one of the best ways people can get involved in improving their air quality is help us transition to cleaner, renewable energy. And that's already happening in these communities. WINYA is leading the way, already getting that dialogue started. But we have cheaper, healthier options already available in South Carolina. It just takes political will. If we want to lower our electricity rates and improve our health, we need to close these coal plants. And another way they can get involved is one thing that Xavier and LaToya are is an equity team that's helping to develop a people's energy plan in South Carolina. We would love to have more public involvement in that plan so that people have a voice in how their electricity is generated and how their health is protected.
Okay. Which areas and how do we know who has these air monitors currently?
I think that would be a question to find out what air monitors are already set up in the state. I think I don't have that knowledge right now available to me, but I think that would be a good question for DHEC, and they're pretty good about providing information in public records. I've had a very good track record with them in that.
We'll follow up with DHEC on that one. So if anyone wanted to support you guys' efforts, how can we reach out to you?
Well, you could reach out to me at Xavier Boatwright. It's xavier.boatwright@sierraclub.org. And I can also share that as a comment to this link show.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys would like to share with our audience?
I think one thing that just to point out, and this kind of goes to why DHEC is not moving forward on the permits for Watery Cross and Winya, is that they did move forward with permits for Williams and Cope, both of which are owned by Dominion. And those permits were reissued in 2016 and 2018. So right around the same time that these other 3 permits, were just sitting in the queue and not being acted on. So it kind of begs the question, why did DHEC move forward with those 2, but decided to sideline these other 3? And why are they still sidelining them after, 2 to 4 years since those other permits were issued? So, I mean, definitely another issue that, I'm hoping will get answered during the litigation, but it's just something to kind of think about as to, what's going on in the thought process of DHEC.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add that that apart from the maybe more severe impacts of these discharges and air pollution around frontline communities who live near the coal plants, that folks should also be aware and alert of downstream impacts as these coal plants sit upstream along our major waterways going from Columbia to like the Charleston Harbor and the Winya Bay. And like the Winya Bay, for example, it acts as a nursery for many forms of wildlife and marine life, and has some very significant qualities there on like more global kind of oceanic scale and ecology. So I guess marine ecology type work. But yeah, there's some significant importance there with the bays and ecological importance to these getting these permits updated.
Okay.
And then beyond these permits, I think this permit issue just highlights the dangers that coal plants are presenting to our communities. But this is also a watershed moment in South Carolina to really transform the way electricity is produced and the way communities are involved in making those decisions. So I'm really excited about our People's Energy Plan that Xavier and LaToya are developing, along with other partners across the state. South Carolina, we pay the highest electricity rates in the country. And that's for a number of reasons, but we can change policies and we can advocate for healthier communities, starting with this updated permit, but going beyond this permit to make sure that not only existing laws are enforced, but that new regulations and policies are enacted so that these coal plants are transitioned into cleaner, more renewable energy sources, these communities are protected, and that we all have a voice in how our electricity is produced. So I'm optimistic that this moment, this litigation, and what follows it will lead to some big changes in how our energy is produced in South Carolina. But it's going to take people getting involved. Dori can't do it by herself, just sitting off lawsuits. She needs the people to support the work and to make their voices heard.
We definitely need the people. So for Will, Dori, Xavier, and LaToya, I am Deontay Winchester, filling in for Miss Marilyn Hemingway. We want to thank you all for viewing and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.